we're going to go to, come on. All right. So tonight we are going to be looking at the Chagim. These are the festivals that are mentioned in the Torah. Eventually cover other festivals and holidays that are that were given outside of the Torah, but these are the main ones. We are also going to be looking at them, I don't want to say superficially, but we're not going to be looking at each holiday super in depth because there's too much material for 1 hour. But it's important to see how they all fit together in order to then understand each piece. Okay? Okay. Shalosh Regalim, the 3 legs. Right? These are the 3 pilgrimage festivals, the 3, what's the right word? Tripod that make, the 3 legs that make a table. These were the 3 times each year, as it says in Deuteronomy, right? 3 times a year on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, on the Feast of Weeks, and on the Feast of Booths. That's Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. They shall appear before the Lord your God in the place that he will choose. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed, but each with his own gift, according to the blessings that the Lord your God has bestowed upon you. So 3 times each year, all of the Jewish people would go to eventually Jerusalem, which is where the temple was built, and they would bring sacrifices, and there would be huge festivals and celebrations. Let's talk about those 3. So these are the 3 pilgrimage festivals. We have Pesach, which is also called the Feast of Matzah, of unleavened bread. Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, so called because it finishes the 7-week cycle of the counting of Omer. And Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, when we build a small little hut, and well, I'll explain that later. All right, so we got our 3 biggies. You'll notice Pesach is the first holiday of the holiday cycle. And that's very important and also very confusing because a lot of people think of Rosh Hashanah as being the beginning of the year. And it is, kind of. So we're going to come back to Rosh Hashanah later. But for now, Pesach is the beginning of the cycle of holidays because it's the beginning of the purpose, the meaning, the spirit of the holiday line. So let's go ahead and talk about how these all fit with history. Because every holiday has a history meaning, and it also has an agriculture meaning, and it also has the spiritual meaning that combines together. All right, so let's do some history. Everybody loves history, right? So all 3 of the pilgrimage festivals, all 3 of the Shalosh Regalim, have a historical connection to Mitzrayim, to the Exodus from Egypt. Pesach is the most obvious connection, right? Pesach, Passover, this is the holiday that celebrates leaving Egypt. This is the very day that we were taken out of Egypt. This is the very moment when our slavery ends. So Pesach, very, very big and obvious historical connection. Shavuot. Shavuot is historically tied to the giving of the Torah. More on that on the next slide. Because the Torah itself doesn't say explicitly that Shavuot is about the giving of the Torah. The Torah simply mentions Shavuot for the agricultural reasons that we'll talk about later. But as we'll see, it is linked to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Sukkot is meant to be a reminder of God's protection over us during our journey through the wilderness. And the citations for those are at the end. Good so far? Okay. So how do we get from Shavuot to the giving of Torah? Well, the Talmud, as I mentioned on the previous page, does the math for us. It says, look, if you count, as the Torah describes our journey from leaving Egypt, from the Exodus, if you count out the days, then after about 7 weeks, you are coming on to Mount Sinai on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, on the first day of Sivan. Then we get a speech from God where he says, you will be a kingdom of priests. And then on the next day, it says that they set boundaries around Mount Sinai so people don't go up on the mountain. And then God says, stay away from women, which I did a YouTube about that a little while ago. It wasn't that women were bad. It was just to make sure both men and women were prepared for the Torah. And after that period of separation, we would have had the giving of the Torah, which happens to also be Shavuot. So even though the Torah doesn't say Shavuot and the Torah giving were the same day, the math of the Torah works out that Shavuot and the giving of the Torah are the same day. That makes sense? Okay. Agriculture. So all three of these holidays have very, very important agricultural meanings and feelings. Now, who here is a farmer? Yeah, you might have been near a farm, right? If you've been near a farm, even if you have a garden, then you know that the seasons have very different feelings and have a very different connection to us. And if your life depended on your farm, not just as a hobby, but really you need your farm or else you die, then your emotions are going to go through a cycle during the year. And these holidays hit that cycle. So for all three of them, they mark major agricultural moments in Israel. Pesach, the first holiday, this is the beginning of the barley harvest. Now think about that for a moment. Pesach comes in early spring. Until that moment, you have been living off of your stored food, the food that you grew last year. And by the time Pesach comes along, I think we have they need something? It's okay. Kids have needs. We all have needs. So by the time Pesach comes along, you're starting to get very worried. You have been trapped in winter and to support you. And what happens in the land of Israel is the first crops that begin to come up is the barley. Barley is a type of grain. It's similar to wheat, but not as tasty as wheat. And also it doesn't give as many calories as wheat. It's a very dark colored grain. Nowadays people, what? It's a grain. It's a grain. So you can make barley bread. You can also make barley soup, where you take the little pieces of barley and you put it in the soup. It's very tasty. But nowadays, most people don't eat barley bread. Wheat bread tastes better. So barley was something, however, even though it wasn't the perfect, favorite, most wonderful food, you needed the barley to keep you alive until you began to harvest your wheat, because the wheat took much longer to grow. So the barley was quicker and came up first, and when you saw that barley, you knew you weren't going to starve. That's a very important feeling if you're a farmer. I'm not going to die. Hooray! And as we can see, that is the emotion of Pesach. Right? Pesach is freedom. It is liberation. It is, I'm going to live. And that barley was the same feeling as getting out of Egypt. Shavuot is the start of that wheat harvest. So this is 7 weeks later, 49 days later. And now the wheat is finally coming in. And the wheat is very, very important because you get more calories from the wheat, and the wheat tastes better, and you grow more wheat than you do barley. And that meant the whole summer was filled with collecting and harvesting the wheat. So Shavuot was this opportunity, now that you had survived, to really make the most of everything and to really celebrate getting ahead in life, not just surviving. And so Shavuot, as the gift of Torah, matches that idea that we were freed from Egypt That's nice. That's great. But being given Torah, that is what actually makes us survive and thrive more than just not be killed. And then Sukkot is the very end after the summer and early autumn harvests, when everything that could be harvested is done. There are very few things left to get. So this is, you end up with your full storerooms. All of your storage has so much food in it, so much that you can't even keep it all, so you have to eat it now. And that meant around Sukkot, you had the best meals of the whole year, because that was the best time to get all the food. Excuse me, let me just check and see if that's a student. All right, never mind. Something I can handle later. Just more hurricane preparation. Okay, so we got the plan, and if you put them together, you can see these parallel themes. I'm going to walk over here and sort of point a little bit. Right, so at the top we have sort of the history line, and at the bottom we have the line. So slavery ends, that's Pesach, that's the barley which ends the winter famine. The Omer, that's the weeks in between Passover and Shavuot. That is us going to Sinai. We're looking forward to it. And the spring harvest brings that forth. Shavuot, 49 days later, we get the Torah. That is the wheat harvest. Now we are really alive. Summer, this is our travel towards Israel. It's the long days of hard work out in the field, which leads to giving shelter along the way and our fullness of life, which is in Sukkot. Make sense? Right, so these are parallel feelings. And if you were a farmer, that feeling of the barley, that feeling of the wheat, that feeling of the full harvest, that would add to your celebration of the holiday. And holiday, with the theme of freedom, the theme of Torah, the theme of God's protection, that would add to your joy at having food. So they work together to make sure that we have that full feeling at each time. Make sense? Okay. So how do we observe them? What do we do for these holidays? Well, for all three of them, there are some things that are in common. We light candles at the beginning of all of these holidays, just like we do for Shabbat. We do a Kiddush just like we do for Shabbat. We okay? Just waving people in. We do the Kiddush just like we do for Shabbat, although it is a little different. It's okay. It's a little different than the Shabbat Kiddush. We make mention of the holiday itself, so that we have that special celebration for it. We, of course, have services, but by services, I mean we do bigger services than we do on a regular day. We do special services. We do Hallel. Hallel is the collection of psalms that we recite at any holiday when we are celebrating a miracle and help that God has given us. And so Hallel is sung. It has amazing melodies. Just look up Hallel on YouTube. You will see so many wonderful singing versions of Hallel. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, we also have special Torah readings for each of the holidays in order to remind ourselves of the themes and remind ourselves of the observance. Also, on all of the holidays, it's like Shabbat, meaning that we don't do melacha, we don't do work. And we're going to cover what work means in more detail in a later class. But for now, just the one thing I want you to know that's a little different is on Shabbat, we do no work at all. On the festivals, we do no work except what's needed for cooking the food. So on Shabbat, you don't cook. You cook on Friday afternoon so that you can eat Friday night. But for a festival, you can cook on the festival. No other work, and no cooking that's more than the festival, right? So you don't bake, 100 loaves of bread. You bake what you need for now. Leftovers are okay, but they shouldn't be the plan. Good? Okay. And like I said, we'll go into detail about the work issues when we get to Shabbat as the focus. Okay, but each holiday also has its own special ways of celebrating, and this is just the surface. Again, I wanted you to see the whole pattern, and then later we'll go back and go into more detail. And also the books that I have recommended have many more details, and I'll put a few links into the YouTube description for some more information. But just to get the general surface so that you have an idea of what each holiday feels like, let's try. We got plenty of time. It's not bad at all. Okay, so Pesach, the first of the holidays. There are a couple of main outstanding features for Pesach. I'm not going to go into, I should point out, I'm not going to go into sacrifices, but in general, these are things that we still do, that are still part of our observance. Most people are most familiar with is having a special Seder, having a special service in your home, a special meal. This is a dinner unlike any other dinner. It is a dinner that has been linked to the story of the Exodus. We do everything we eat. Our conversation around the table is linked to remembering how important it is for us, for the world, and even the things that we taste should be connected to that. In particular, we eat matzah. Matzah is unleavened bread. That means bread that is not chametz, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we also eat maror. Maror are bitter plants, and they are it's meant to remind us of the bitterness of the slavery. But we also drink 4 cups of wine. Not all at once, it's spread out throughout the meal. Right, the 4 cups of wine are meant to remind us of God's 4 promises of redemption. So this whole Seder meal makes us feel like a slave. We're eating poor bread, lechem oni, the bread of affliction, the bread of poor people. We're eating bitter herbs. We dip in salt water to remember the tears. We use something called haroset, which looks like mud that reminds us of the bricks. But we also have to remember the redemption. So we feel like a slave so that we know what it's like to be free. Sometimes we take our freedom for granted, and the Seder is meant to fix that. So a little bit more on chametz. Chametz is prohibited during Pesach, not only for the Seder meal, but for the whole week of Passover. We are not allowed to eat anything that has chametz. Is a flour that has been made with either wheat, barley, oats, rye, or spelt. Nobody eats spelt anymore. It's okay, but it is technically on the list. You have to go to like Whole Foods if you want to find spelt. You're not going to find it in Publix or Winn-Dixie. It's not a popular grain anymore. But those 5 grains, if you mix them with water more than 18 minutes, it has already begun to rise. The puffiness of the bread has already begun. And that means, not good for Pesach. So when we eat matzah, we have to make sure that we mix the water and the bread quickly, and we get it into the oven quickly. And that way you end up with bread that looks kind of like a very thin, almost like a cracker. It doesn't have to be that dry and stiff, but nowadays most of the matzah that's made by a machine, but it is very, very flat because there's no time for it to rise like regular bread does. Right? People here, you guys ever make bread? Right? You mix the dough and then you leave it for a while, right? Because if you leave it, it puffs up and it tastes better. Well, we're not supposed to be eating this because it tastes good. We're supposed to be eating this because it reminds us and it makes us feel that feeling of being a slave. So in addition to only eating matzah, to make sure that a lot of people you know who are Jewish a little our house on this time. Cleaning is not so much. When we get closer to Pesach later in the year, I'll tell you about how much you have to clean and how much you don't have to clean so that you can get the right balance. Good? Good. Shavuot. There are no unique observances for Shavuot itself. Shavuot is only one day long. We celebrate it for 2 days outside of Israel. I'll talk about that another time. But it's only one day long. And part of the reason why it's only one day long is because to take off at the beginning of the harvest season, right? You got to work. So we take one day, we celebrate, we thank God for this, and then back in the field harvesting the grain. So Shavuot doesn't have any unique requirements for how we celebrate it. However, there are many customs for Shavuot. So, for example, there is a custom to eat dairy food on Shavuot. Now, usually for holidays, Judaism highly recommends eating meat. There was a feeling that people were going to want to eat meat because good, and also because in the ancient world, meat was rare. I don't mean how they cook it. I mean, you didn't get a lot of meat. For some people, they might eat meat only a few times every year because they couldn't afford more meat than that. I mean, after all, if you have a cow and you kill it, then it's gone. And there's no refrigerator, no freezer to keep the meat. You kill it, you eat it. That's it. Same thing with sheep. You kill it, you eat it. That's it. But if you milk your cow, you get more from it. If you have a sheep and you get the wool, you get more from it. So most people would not eat meat very often. The tradition wanted us to do was on holidays, that's when we should eat meat. Because truly feel happier, because meat makes us happy when we're not used to it every week, and that would give us an extra connection. The sacrifice temple were connected to these holidays because we didn't just burn up the sacrifices. We only put a little bit on the altar and the rest was eaten by the person who brought it. And because there was more than one person could eat, they would invite not only their family, but also strangers, people who were poor, widows, orphans, the Levites, other people who didn't have enough, I mean, a much better and happier community by eating together. But for Shavuot, there was a custom that instead of meat, we eat dairy. Why? Well, that custom doesn't have a very clear origin, but there are some different explanations. One is because we are reminded of dairy with the idea that Israel is the land of milk and honey, that Israel is a sweet and beautiful place. Mentioned in Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, being a love poem between God and the people of Israel, and, if you will, really more like our wedding, was Mount Sinai. So having dairy to remember that is kind of like having a favorite food that you remember from your wedding. Another explanation is that we knew that God was giving us the laws of kashrut, but we didn't get the Torah yet. And since we knew that we had to kill and prepare animals in a special way, but we didn't know what that way was yet, we had to wait until we had the Torah, and that meant we had to eat dairy in the meantime, because dairy was much easier to prepare. So there is another custom that's about 500 years old called Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and it's a custom that we do here as well. And this was having a night of study. The teaching goes that on the day that God gave us the Torah, and the day that God called to us from Mount Sinai, that we were the night before, that we overslept the next morning. And so God had to call us to the mountain. And we were understandably upset that we were late for such an important meeting. In order to prevent that, we study through the night so that we show that we really love Torah and that we are ready in the morning to accept it. So we're sort of fixing our mistake in the past. Good. Sukkot. Sukkot is full of observances, but I'm just going to focus on two of the main ones that you're going to see the most. What's that? Yes? Coming up, yes. Sukkot is, by the way, the next of the pilgrimage holidays on the calendar. Sukkot, we have a mitzvah to dwell in the sukkah, to be in the sukkah. What is a sukkah? A sukkah is a hut It's a booth. You build it in your backyard, you build it on your patio, you can build it in your driveway. It is a little structure, and it has a roof that is made out of natural materials, so branches from trees and things like that. It's what we call the schach. And then there are walls that hold it up, of course, and we are supposed to stay in the sukkah for the 7 days. That's supposed to become our main home, our main house. There's a problem, at least if you live here in Florida. If being in the sukkah makes you miserable because of the bugs, because of the rain, because of the heat, because of the humidity, the Torah also calls the time of Sukkot Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. Is asked in the Talmud, which is more important, rejoicing or being in the sukkah? And the answer is, for the first Kiddush, the first night, saying the blessing, be in the sukkah. But for all the other times, all the other days of Sukkot, if being in the sukkah makes you sad, then you can go inside. Right? You should try and see how you feel. Try to get used to it. Don't be so spoiled by air conditioning and all of that. You know, try and go out into the sukkah. But if being in the sukkah, it's just, this is terrible and I hate it, it's more important to rejoice on the holiday than it is to sit in the sukkah. Chance. Sometimes when Sukkot comes late in Florida, it's cool enough, it's nice enough, and it can be really beautiful out in your sukkah. And the sukkah is a great reminder of all that we need is really just a little place to live and our family and a little bit to eat. We're lucky that we have homes and all the wonderful comforts that we have been able to get. But we also need to remember that on Sukkot that we don't really need very, very much. It's very, very little what our real needs are. Questions about the sukkah? Well, we can talk about how you build a sukkah and what it looks like. It's not very hard. The one thing that is a little tricky in Florida because of all the trees is the sukkah has to be under the sky, right? So you can't build your sukkah under a tree. Or underneath your roof, or underneath the screened patios and things like that. It has to be between you, there's the sukkah roof, and then only open air, all the way up to heaven. A little tricky here. We've got one spot in our backyard that works. That's where we get to build our sukkah. But for a lot of houses, there are so many trees or covered patios that it can be a little tricky. To be big. The minimum size of the sukkah is basically the size of a human being. And in fact, there's a great discussion that you can even build your sukkah on the back of a camel. If you were on a caravan, if you were traveling, you could build your sukkah on the back of a camel and sit on the camel and you're okay. So if you have a very small place, it's okay to build a very small sukkah and at least you can still do the mitzvah. But if you have more room, it's nice to make it a little bigger.
New York, it's on the fire escape.
Yep.
So you can share a wall.
Yes.
With your permanent dwelling.
Absolutely.
Work out.
Right.
Yeah, small.
The walls can be anything. It's the roof that makes the sukkah the sukkah. You need to share a wall or two with your house or your apartment building, that's fine. It's just a question of the roof. And also in big cities, sometimes people will build on the roof of the apartment buildings if they don't have any other place. On Sukkot, we also very interesting and major mitzvah, and that is the shaking of the lulav and etrog. So God tells us to take a palm branch, which is literally the lulav, and to take the hadas, myrtle, a branch from the myrtle tree, and to take the arava, which are willow branches, willows that grow near rivers and things like that, and to take an etrog, which is a citron. It looks kind of like a supersized lemon. We take all of those together in our two hands, and during the service each day, we shake it. We shake forward, to the right, to our back, to our left, up, and down, right? 6 directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those 6 directions are meant to remind us of God being all around us, of God's blessings being all around us. And by holding the lulav, we are thanking God for all that we have been blessed with. You'll notice the lulav is made up of two things that we use and two things that we don't use so much, right? The lulav, the palm branch, is from the date palm, and we love to eat dates. And if you don't like dates, I don't know what to do for you. Dates are wonderful. And the etrog, the citron, is also very, very important. And maybe you've never cooked with it, but a lot of the citrus extracts that people still use for flavoring in sodas and things like that come from the etrog. And it is a very powerful and lovely flavor. Hadas, the myrtle branches, we can use those, but we use them for their scent, for their smell. If you take the myrtle leaves and you dry them out and then you grind them up, it makes a beautiful, beautiful smell. And you can even use it for Havdalah if you want that, and we'll talk about Havdalah another time. But the willow branches, we end up using them for Hoshana Rabbah, but we don't have time to go into that right now. So they do have kind of uses, but we're also thanking God even for things that we don't use very much, because God's blessings are more than what we need. You'll notice I put spine, eyes, lips, and heart. This is a midrash that says that if you look at the pieces of the lulav, and the lulav branch is like your spine, and the hadas is in the shape of eyes, and the arava, the willow, is in the shape of lips, and the citron is like a heart. And the idea being that we serve God with all of our body, right? With our heart, with our strength, with our eyes, and with our lips. Good? Good. There are many more other teachings about lulav and etrog as well, but hopefully that gets the ball rolling. Holidays. All right, so those are the three main biblical holidays, the Shalosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage festivals. Right? Say them with me. Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. And those have a very tight story arc that goes through them of what the calendar was like for the farmers and what the history was like for our people. Good. But we also get some bonuses. We also hear about Rosh Hashanah. Now, it's not called Rosh Hashanah in the Torah. It's Yom Din and Yom Teruah is the main name, right? The day of judgment and the day of sounding. And when we mean sounding, we mean from the shofar. The shofar is a type of horn that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. Now, on Yom Din, when we think of Rosh Hashanah as being a day of judgment, this is not, like some movie Judgment Day and fire and all of that. This is a day of what we call cheshbon nefesh, of spiritual accounting. That we use is that we are coming before God, and God is opening up a book, and on the book is written everything we did last year. He's doing the math. And so we got 3 good things, 4 bad things, a little good, a little bad, and coming up with where are we in the balance? Are we good? Are we mostly bad? Are we all bad? Or are we all good? By the way, the general feeling is that most of us are in the middle, right? No one should think that they're terrible. No one should think they're perfect. Most of us are in the middle because God is judging us. And because we are now really thinking very carefully, what have I done? Who am I? What is my life? And if we imagine ourselves in the middle, then we should probably try to fix a few things. Right? We're going to ask God for an extension. Before God signs the final judgment, we want to ask, just wait 10 days, and I'm going to fix a few things. Right? I'm just going to fix a few things. And so we get these 10 days where we try to imagine that we are going to fix. We're going to do tshuva, which I'll talk about on the next slide. We're going to do repentance. We're going to fix our behavior. So that way, we know that God will take us back lovingly and forgive everything that we've done wrong if we are doing our best to fix it. Make sense? Right. Really, really very important concept in Judaism. This idea that, yes, we make mistakes, but God has given us a way to fix our mistakes. And Rosh Hashanah is really the beginning of the most intense to fix our mistakes. It's called the Yom Teruah, as I mentioned, because we sound the shofar. It is a mitzvah to hear the shofar. So even if you don't know how to blow the shofar, you're okay. As long as you're here to hear the shofar, you've done that mitzvah. Question?
And I have to
You know how to blow the shofar? Yeah. It's not hard.
landing in English.
Yes, it's not very hard. So if anybody's interested in learning how, I'd be happy to show them the technique. It's not very difficult. If you know how to blow a trumpet, or if you know how to blow a bugle, then you can learn how to blow a shofar.
And both men and women do this on this, limited for this one, Yom Teruah.
Can a woman blow the shofar?
This is
Yes.
also-
Yes. Yep. The mitzvah is to hear the shofar, and it is acceptable for a woman to be the person sounding the shofar. The shofar is meant to be a wake-up call, right? Like your alarm clock, or it's meant to be like an alarm bell, like a fire alarm. Ding, 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 ding. It is supposed to get your attention and call you to action. Because for much of the year, we kind of, we just get on with life and we don't think too carefully about what we're doing. And it's just, the shofar, it penetrates. It just knocks down all of those walls inside of us. The sound is really incredible. If we have time, maybe I'll try and blow a few notes before we go tonight. But the sound is something that goes right past the words and right past all of our defenses, hits us in the heart, and we're like, all right, you're right. I've got to fix things.
In the ancient days, that will come to our own people and the spirits.
Right. So the shofar was used long ago, not just for Rosh Hashanah, but was also used as a way of sending messages from one town to another. So, in one village, they would go, and the other village would respond, and that would pass that message to the next town, to the next town, and the next town, the next town. So the shofar had a lot of uses, but this is the one use that we still use it for. Yom Kippur then, which is 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is the day when we are supposed to finish our tshuva, to finish fixing everything that we have done. Now, wrongs that we have done that are between us and God forgives them when we're ready. But wrongs that we have done between ourselves and someone else, God will wait to forgive us until we have made things right with that other person. Right? So if I slap Sigfrido, I can't go to God and say, oh God, please forgive me for slapping Sigfrido. I feel so bad about it. It was really wrong. I shouldn't have done that. God is looking at me saying, have you talked to Sigfrido? Have you apologized to him? Once you apologize to him, then yes, God is fine, right? Ready to forgive us at a moment. But you have to fix what you have done in this world before you ask God for forgiveness. It's a very important part. Now, what does it mean to really do tshuva, to really repent for what you did? It's not just saying, I'm sorry. Admitting, right? I slapped him. I'm not denying it. It wasn't an accident. I did it. Wrong. I should not have slapped you. I had no good reason. There's no excuse for what I did. Now, those first two are perhaps the hardest things for us to do. If we do something wrong, we like to pretend like we didn't do it. No, I don't remember hitting him. No, I couldn't have been. No, that wasn't me. Or we'll admit that we did it, but we will try to admit that what we did wasn't really wrong. Making me angry, right? He was making me angry. Or, we just play like that. It wasn't trying to be mean. I didn't know that he would be so upset. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry that you took it that way. That wasn't what I meant, for you to think. All of those things are not good apologies. A real apology is, I did it and it was wrong. don't want to do it again, right? Determined to not do it again. I hit you. I shouldn't have hit you because it was wrong for me to hit you, and I am not going to hit you again. That is my plan. I am determined. I am working in my life to make sure that I don't hit you or anyone else again. I have to actually be on guard to make sure that in the same situation or in similar situations, you don't do that same thing again. Question?
So these are intentional wrongs?
Intentional or accidental, right? Because most accidents aren't always pure accidents. Right? Most accidents are usually because somebody was not being careful. So for example, if I'm rushing and I step on someone's foot, it's an accident. I wasn't trying to step on the person's foot, but the only reason I stepped on their foot was because I was too busy and running. So I have to apologize to them. I'm sorry, I stepped on your foot. I was rushing and not paying attention. I should not have been doing that. I am really sorry for what I did. I will be more careful, even when I'm in a rush, to make sure I don't hurt someone else.
Okay, so I step on your foot, I'm going to ask you for forgiveness right then and there.
That's fine.
You're done.
You're done.
Bring this up later on.
Exactly, right. So Yom Kippur, well, the whole section of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is for all the things that you haven't taken care of yet. Ideally, if I step on your foot, I'm going to say, I'm sorry right now. Sometimes we make mistakes and we want to avoid, asking forgiveness, either mistakes between us and God or between us and other people. And we keep pushing it off and we push it off and we push it off. Yom Kippur is telling us you can't push it off anymore. You've got to do it now.
You are responsible for your own actions.
Well, you are responsible for your own actions, and you should fix your actions immediately. But if you haven't, this is the final day, right? There's no more bonus time. This is when it's due. So Yom Kippur is supposed to create that feeling in us of urgency, of the need to finally make everything right. And once you have, it is an amazing feeling. And when Yom Kippur finishes and you feel that God has indeed forgiven everything that you have done, it is just an absolutely wonderful feeling. It's one of the reasons why our tradition says that Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year. Think of what it is to live and have that feeling of, I no longer have any guilt. I have taken care of all of my problems. Getting rid of that burden of mistakes, at least for a year, is a really amazing feeling. And both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur fit into our cycle, but they're kind of slipped in. If you'll forgive me, let me see if this works. Yes. There we are. I was looking for my big map. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur come here between the summer and Sukkot. They are right here. Rosh Hashanah is on the first day. Yom Kippur is on the 10th day. Sukkot is on the 15th day of Tishrei. So it's 1, 10, 15. A really busy time of year. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are meant to be a spiritual parallel, a spiritual equivalent to what we are doing with our produce. So imagine if you're a farmer, or if you are a cowboy, or you're a shepherd, counting everything you had before winter came, because you need to know, do I have enough to make it till next year? And so you're going to go through and you're going to be counting your sacks of wheat and your sacks of barley, and you're going to be counting all of your jars of pickles and all of your olives. And that accounting was very important, because if you didn't get the count right, you were going to starve to death. Well, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is our spiritual accounting, where we are checking to make sure that our spirit will get us through to next year, right? You're checking for all of that balance in your spiritual barn to make sure that you're ready to go forward. Which brings me as well to, why do we call it Rosh Hashanah? Why do we call this the beginning of the year if Pesach is the first holiday? Well, it's because Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the next agricultural cycle, right? The produce reboots at this point. We finish the harvest, and then we begin plowing and preparing our fields to grow for the next year. So Rosh Hashanah is the point where we flip the agriculture from harvest and get ready to prepare again. So we've gotten everything we could from last year, and now we have to grow for the coming year. And so Rosh Hashanah, along with Yom Kippur, is that spiritual flipping as well. I need to account for myself at some point, and we do it at that same point. Make sense? Okay. Yom Kippur. Also, one of the things that's most famous about Yom Kippur is the fact that we fast. Now, fasting, too narrow of a term. Fasting means we don't eat, we don't drink, we don't anoint ourselves. Now, anointing is not something that most of us do anyway, but anointing means to put perfumes or oils and stuff. That was the way that people used to make themselves more beautiful and attractive in the ancient world. We don't do any bathing for pleasure, so hygiene for washing your hands and keeping off germs, no problem. Don't go take a nice 3-hour bath soak. Right? This is not your bubble bath day. No leather shoes. Leather shoes were considered to be the most fancy and arrogant type of clothing. So if you're wearing leather shoes, it means you're thinking, I am so wonderful, I've done nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm great. And if you're feeling like that, you're probably not going to really be doing that self-examination. Like if you think you're great, then you're not ready to say I'm sorry. And that's one of the big problems in life, is people who think they're too big, too important, too great, that they never have to say sorry. And also on Yom Kippur, we do not have any sexual intimacy with our spouses. Right? So just take a break. And all of these are meant to help remind us that this world, this physical world, although it's nice and wonderful, and we've already talked about how much we like eating and how much we like drinking and all the other things, still we need to make sure that we clear our plate, literally, in order that we can focus entirely on the spiritual for this one day. And realize that it is our spirit that truly sustains us. As much as the other things we also need to keep our body alive, our spirit needs Yom Kippur to keep it alive. And so for one day, we remove all the other things so we can see that more clearly. Make sense? Okay, one more bonus holiday. Shmini Atzeret, the holiday that everybody forgets. Poor Shmini Atzeret, I feel bad for it. Shmini Atzeret is the 8th day after Sukkot begins. So Sukkot begins, and then there are 7 days of that holiday. And then the very next day, there is another holiday called Shmini Atzeret that's mentioned in the Torah. And the Torah doesn't tell us why. The Torah doesn't give us any history about Shmini Atzeret. The Torah doesn't give us any agricultural ideas that are happening on Shmini Atzeret. It's just sort of inserted right after Sukkot. So what is it that we're supposed to be doing? Well, this is one place where looking at the sacrifices really is very important. Notice that during Sukkot, tons of sacrifices. We are sacrificing a whole lot of animals during the 7 days of Sukkot. In fact, we are sacrificing 70 cows during those 7 days. It's a little different each day, so it's not like 10 cows per day. And our sages say those 70 cows were our way on behalf of all the nations of the world, because we would often say the 70 nations of the world. So the idea was that our sacrifices during Sukkot, yes, they were for us, but we were also making sacrifices for nations, and God would be willing to be patient and forgive them as well. On Shmini Atzeret, no, just one. On Shmini Atzeret, everybody else has gone home. All the other nations, all our thoughts of the other nations have gone home, and we're just finishing off this intense time from Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, 7 days of Sukkot. We get one more day where it's just the family. It's like the after party. If everybody here has ever been to like a wedding party or a bar mitzvah party, There's always a time, usually like the last half hour, 45 minutes, when the waiters are picking up the plates, and it's just the family and really, really close friends still dancing on the dance floor, right? Still hanging out and talking. The music isn't so loud anymore. That's Shmini Atzeret. It's this time to just relax and have this personal experience of no other obligations, no other mitzvahs we have to do, just be with God. And it really does have a very special feeling. A more recent celebration of Torah began in the early Middle Ages and developed over the finish. Only do this reading from the end and reading from the beginning. Everybody has a chance to be called up to the Torah. We also take all the Torahs out of the Aron HaKodesh. We dance around several Hakafot in these laps. Amazing, joyous time. Where else can you find people who dance with law books, right? But when you realize how special this is, of what the Torah represents, then you understand why we dance. And really you can see why Simchat Torah, even though it's a new holiday, only about 1,000 years old, why we celebrate it with so much joy. Okay, questions? All right, wow, that was the whirlwind tour of the Torah holidays. Now there are a few other holidays that will come up later. There is one other holiday that isn't trivia. Holiday is in the Bible, in the Tanakh, but not in Easter, exactly. The holiday of Purim, right? The holiday of Purim, the holiday of Purim is from the book of Esther. In the Persian period, long after. Yeah, and Purim in Israel is an amazing thing. Us for tonight, but if you give me a moment, I will a little bit. What? Right.